Is Tennessee and Alabama a top tier rivalry in college sports? I mean, their game when they play football isn't even called Tennessee versus Alabama. It's called the third Saturday in October. So that question came up the other day during a live stream we had, and we were talking about the best rivalries in college sports. Here's the conversation that followed. Tennessee versus Bama. Okay, I'm glad you said that because here's reality of the situation. And I'm sure all the people watching this right now already know this, but for anybody in the interwebs who comes across this video and you make it to this point in the video, just so we're clear, the SEC was formed for Alabama and Tennessee. Just so we're clear, like that was the deal. There's still a plaque at the hotel in Knoxville where the conference was officially formed. And it was formed for those two schools because they were the perennial powers in football. And so that's why the SEC was formed. Why do people think it wasn't luck of the draw? Why do people think that the permanent crossover between the divisions when the divisions were made in 92, why do people think that Tennessee and Bama were the permanent crossover?
Yeah.
Because that was the rival, the premier game for decades in the SEC. They were the reason the SEC was formed. And people today don't get that because we just lived through the decade of dysfunction and stuff like that. And so you tell that to people who are, under 15 years old today, and they're like, no, man, that's really the case, That's why, hey, if you missed our show with Mark Nagy from Friday, go check that out yesterday. We got my days away from me there. Go check that out. That was a fascinating conversation. But Tennessee, Bama, that was a rivalry. And I'm going to tell y'all something that I love Josh Heupel about. I love Josh Heupel for this. As all the talk about the schedule changes for the SEC football teams and everything is coming up, which, by the way, now, I don't know if anybody saw this, but it looks like it's definitely going to be 2025, not 2024 now. That news came out. It was either late last night or this morning. I can't remember. I think it might have been this morning. Texas and Oklahoma were pushing to enter the league in 2024. And that's pretty much done now. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work out. So it's going to be 2025 when Texas and Oklahoma enter the SEC. I saw that come across the news feed. I think it was this morning. So what that means is, here's the SEC. Well, and Zach's right, because, people under the age of 15 is all they know is losing, because that's exactly right. Until last season. That's exactly right. And so he's talking about Tennessee fans. And so when you think about the schedule potential options, it seems like the most commonly promoted one now is the 9-3 schedule alignment. You got 9 conference games and 3 out of conference games. It sounds like that's what they're going to.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, there's going to be, in your 9 games, you're going to have 3 permanent opponents. That's the best word, I guess.
Essentially your pod.
Exactly. So you got 3 permanent opponents, and the other 6 are on a rotational basis every year. So Josh Heupel was asked before this season even started. It may have been at SEC Media Days, come to think of it. But he was asked if they go to the 9-3 with 3 permanent opponents and 6 rotating opponents, who would you want your 3 opponents to be? Without hesitation, he said, well, I mean, obviously we want to keep that rivalry with Alabama. That was the first school he mentioned. And I was like, boo, yeah, man, that's what I'm talking about. That pumped me up without hesitation. He was like, well, obviously we want to keep the rivalry with Alabama. And then he said, after that, I think you look at geography and Kentucky, or he said, in Vanderbilt being our in-state school, and then Kentucky being the next closest school to their campus. And so I like Zach's opinion too. Zach said, I want Georgia, Bama, and Florida. I love it. Now, for strength of schedule, that'd be good. For consistently making it to the playoff, that may not be the best route, but I do love like the attitude of bring it on, baby. I like that. That's good. But I think also there's credence to the Saban mentality of schedule as many FCS opponents as you can, because ultimately all that matters is wins.
Yep.
So I loved though that, and hey, I'd be totally fine with those 3. Bama, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky. Let us play Vanderbilt and Kentucky every day. Use that geography to our advantage there, right? But I love the fact that the first, and remember, He said, "Why the face Russ with the laughing emoji?"
So one other option that's on the table is that you have a pod and you have those 3 games permanently. And then to maintain some of those natural rivals, you have 1 permanent crossover, and then you have 4 or 5 rotating games. So if that ends up being the option, I'm fine with Bama being the permanent crossover. But I would love for our 3 permanent games to be South Carolina, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt, because I would really like for our 3 permanent games to be 3 wins every year.
Yeah, no doubt. All that matters is wins. Reed Carringer, he's one of the writers for Football Time magazine. He's one of the guys who helped start Rocky Top Insider, and he repeatedly on their podcast all the time for years, and this was several years ago because he's not in it now, but he would always say, hey, all that matters is wins. It doesn't matter who you play. If you don't lose, they're not going to drop you in the rankings,
That's right.
And so
look at Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah, exactly. Schedule as many cupcakes as you can, because all that matters are the tally marks in the win column. That's it. That's all that matters.
Yep.
And so that'll be interesting to see what ends up happening in that situation. I love the fact that, Josh Heupel, and remember when he said that, they hadn't beaten Alabama yet. He had not yet beaten Alabama when he made that comment, and he didn't shy away from it at all. He was like, give us Bama every year. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about. That's what the SEC was made for. That was a really interesting conversation. And hopefully now that Tennessee will continue to win more in this matchup, over the last decade of dysfunction, shout out to Mark Nagy's book. That hasn't been the case, but we're beyond that now. Tennessee has beaten Alabama. Hopefully that'll continue to be a trend, and it'll be a much more evenly matched rivalry in the years to come. We thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, we would love it if you do that, and you can do that by just clicking that little icon or logo right there. If you would love to see the full episode of this podcast that this was an excerpt from, it'll show up on the screen right down there too. So we appreciate you, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.